Hey everybody, so today I want to show you how you can carve out or make some custom key elements or key features instead of the kind of more random rocks that we've been making so far for your scenes. I want you to think about Disneyland for a second, and what's the first thing you think of? You might think of rides, you might think of food, but generally the experience, the image that comes to most people's minds is this Cinderella's castle here. It serves a really important function to the park beyond just being cool to look at or take your picture with. In fact, when you walk into the park, you can't see it from the parking lot, but as soon as you walk into the park, you're suddenly greeted by Cinderella's castle. And because if you look at the vantage point here, what's to the left and right of you is nice little town, shops, things like that. Straight ahead of you is this big castle, and people just walk towards it. Your eye is drawn to it. It's just shot against this empty sky. It makes it seem way bigger than it actually is. In actuality, it's more like a 3 or 4 story tall building. It's actually not that tall, but it's a real great optical illusion. Here's what happens that's really interesting when you walk towards it. You walk right up to this right here, which is this statue of the creator Walt Disney and his creation Mickey Mouse. In fact, you can't walk straight to the castle. You'll get to this little rotunda here first. And this is what I want to talk about here, what's really interesting. There's first something that catches our eye, we walk up to it, and then we stop. We see a much smaller thing, but this little rotunda is actually a key to seeing all the other areas of the park. And in fact, if we look at it here on Google Maps, it's much clearer what's happening here. This is literally the center, and there's 2 concentric rings, and the castle's up here, and all of the other areas of the park split off from this. This is called a hub and spoke design when we think about like environment or level layouts. And it's all about guiding your eye to a certain point. You see, they didn't want people just randomly milling and wandering around. They wanted them to go into the center of the park and then disseminate out to the different areas of the park. Because when you're standing there, when you look around, you see a couple different peaks. You'll see Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, you'll see the Matterhorn, you'll see Space Mountain, all 3 of which are unique. They're colored differently, they're distinctive from each other in shape because it gives you paths or options to take your day's journey into. And as you go through, there are smaller peaks, smaller mountains, smaller things to guide you through there. They called these things weenies, and it's sort of a funny term because Walt apparently coined it because when they were trying to get animals to respond on camera, they would put a hot dog on a stick and put it right over the camera, and that way a dog would always look right at the camera. Sort of like this poor tortured soul staring at these cupcakes. And in the same way, it's this thing that's designed to guide your eye around. Well, it turns out that's also a really important thing in framing and composition and in laying out stuff. I mean, we can look at films, and I'm going to keep with the Disney theme here for a second. Think about big formations like Pride Rock or Skull Rock from Peter Pan. These are things that serve to evoke a mood or a style, but they're also like really important places, locations where important events in these movies happen, and they are iconic in their own right because they are memorable. In much the same way, real life rock formations also draw our attention. We are attracted to them. Pictured rocks here in Michigan or Devil's Tower in Wyoming. You can think of the Grand Canyon or something like Niagara Falls. In fact, unique formations, unique jutting out points are interesting to us. We want to walk towards them. So what we want to create is something that is unique and interesting to look at, something that will draw the attention of our viewer. So I'm going to pop into Blender here and make sure my little screen guy is on. And let's start, we've been making a lot of stuff so far with all the other regular modeling tools, but I want to show you how we can use the sculpt tools with some of the tools we've been using already to just kind of make something interesting by hand. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in a new cube. Now I could choose to shape this out ahead of time, but I want to show you how we can do all of the shaping in our sculpting mode. So right now, if I look at my wireframe for my object, coming up here and click on wireframe, it's just got these couple sides. So I do want to give it a couple divisions to start with. So I come up to subdivision surfaces. I want to keep it simple because I want it staying as a cube for now. And I'm just going to up it to maybe 3 in the viewport. That seems pretty good. And I want to make sure I click apply, otherwise this won't be sculptable geometry. Now I can click into the sculpting mode. And if you already have one of like a 2D drawing tablet like I recommend you get for the class, this would be a great time to use it because these are all pressure sensitive. And I highly recommend you take any button that you have on the barrel of your pen. If you have like a Wacom, they always have a button on the barrel, and you set that to the middle mouse click because that'll help you navigate. If not, you can always come up to preferences under edit preferences, and there's actually an interface opportunity here under navigation, I believe. Maybe it's under input. Yeah, emulate 3-button mouse. And this will let you actually use the Alt key with left mouse to simulate a middle button mouse, so you can actually do all the navigating, even if your tablet pen doesn't have any buttons on the barrel, just on the tip. So that's what you could turn on if you're missing that feature. So I'm just navigating around like everything else, and if you haven't used one of these tablets, it could take a little getting used to. But the reason we like these and we use these is if I take my sculpt tool, I can go light or I can go heavy with it, and that's actually really important to getting subtlety across here. Now, since I want to make this kind of like natural looking and rocky, I want to make sure none of these symmetries are on. If they're on, then it's going to always look fake because it's going to look reflected. And then the next thing I want to do is turn on this thing called Dynatopo. So if I click this, what it's actually going to do, and go ahead and click the warning, as I carve, it'll actually create new geometry for me, which is really handy. Because if I hit F to scale this down and I hit Control to carve away, it actually makes the finer, the smaller my brush is, so I go really small with my brush, it's gonna make finer and finer geometry as it tries to keep up with my overall surface. I'm gonna go ahead and go into my display options here. It's this one, and I'm gonna turn wireframe off so I can just be focused on this stuff. So let's talk about the controls a little bit. If I press F, or not, I'm sorry, if I hold Shift down, it almost works like an eraser. Let me, I forgot my screen keys turn off every time I go to a new menu. So if I hold down Shift, it almost works like an eraser kind of function, you can think about it, where it pulls feature away. It just kind of pulls my surface away. So I kind of round this out a little bit. And I got a bunch of different brushes that I can use along the side. I'm just gonna double arrow drag them over so they're a little easier to select. And it's fun to just play with some of these. So like inflate will inflate something. Any of these brushes, I can always hit Control to pull it back. And I can do lots of different things with it. I could make like a land bridge by, let's say using, in this case, the snake hook tool is really good for this kind of thing. F to make it larger. I could make like a land bridge just by pulling some of this over. So I pulled like a little skinny thing over, and then I'm going to use this inflate, and I'm just going to, you know, sort of build it up now. And you can see, compared to the way we've been doing a lot of our modeling, which is much more of a CAD-based modeling approach, this is almost like a much more natural kind of way of doing things like that. So you could kind of build up like something of a natural formation or bridge. I don't really like it, so I'm gonna do something a little bit different. And what I want to do is take this model and I'm gonna make kind of a, you know, a piratey rock formation. So I'm gonna just take, and I think you can do most everything with the standard draw one, and we'll talk a lot more about these sculpting tools, especially when we get into character stuff. But I'm just gonna hit Control, and I'm just gonna drag out like a couple little, like almost like eye sockets, and then let's get almost like some teeth for it. Let's carve into it a little bit more. Let's build this up, and then F to scale this down. Maybe make it even smaller. And I'm just sort of kind of building this up and shrinking it down. I feel like I don't have enough geometry here, so I'm going to go over to this modifier, and I'm going to do another subdivision surface, and I'm going to go up to 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply it because I want more, I want to like just increase how much geometry I have to work with. So if I take a look at my stuff right now under wireframe, I should have just ideally more. Actually, I think I have to turn off Dynatopo to do that first. So let me try that again. I'm going to go into layout mode to do that, because I think the Dynatopo thing is fighting with it. So subdivision surface, it'll subdivide it for me. I'm going to go at like 2 times because I want pretty good resolution. And I'm going to hit that. And now I'm going to go back to sculpting, and I'm just going to work with this. You got to be careful that you go too high, because you can definitely go too high with something like this. I'm going to use one of these, I think there's like a flatten or a scrape. So flatten kind of pulls them up together, but I like scrape a lot better because it kind of cuts away the form. It's great for making, this is also like a great way of making kind of these rocks manually, where you can just kind of scrape and cut away at the surface. So I'm looking to get rid of any of these like corners, because that doesn't feel like a rock. Like a rock wouldn't be able to have corners and stuff like that. And let's go ahead and go back to my draw tool. Again, F changes my size, even smaller, and then just kind of carve out, like, again, we're trying to get it sort of piratey feeling here. So, and we're right now, because this is one of the things we're doing, since we are going to be going with the whole low poly thing with it, we don't have to go perfect. We can kind of just get the idea across. Smooth some stuff back. And then I want to use maybe like this clay strips here, because this is going to help me kind of like make striations if I want to have like a type of, like, get the idea across that it's like a rock. I can just draw across this. And this is again why, because I can go really light with it with the pressure sensitivity, or I can go really heavy. And that just gives me so much more control. If you are doing this to mouse, I'm sorry, but it's definitely not as fun as doing it with little pen tool thing. The sculpt tools in Blender have gotten just so much better over the years. There was definitely, they've always been okay, but there's definitely, especially the last couple iterations of this, have gotten just like leaps and bounds better. So using control to kind of carve some stuff away and carve some stuff forward. And, you know, I like to just kind of play with it, rotate around and see what I kind of get. And then maybe do a little pass with that, flatten and just hit. Let's do the scrape instead. I'm liking what I get a lot better with the scrape. Just hit those up a little bit to just kind of flatten a couple things out. Make it feel a little rockier. And then I can always come to G, which is my move tool, and I can just shape and form and move these things wherever I want. So when I've done that, I can come back to layout, and just like I did with all of this, I can go to add modifier, and I can do my regular decimate. So let's go ahead and turn off wireframe so we can see the effect. Now I can use the regular decimate, which of course is based on how far things are. So depending on the scale of the object, we might have to go bigger or smaller. And that's pretty cool, but I want to show you a different mode in Decimate. It's called Planar, and it tries to chunk things off to make them flat. So it's saying, what is the angle limit to which it'll go flat? And it gets this kind of like cool, like a rasterized look. If we take a look at what's actually happening with the wireframe, we see it's creating these really complex, big faces, which normally, like, we couldn't really use this as geometry, but this is one of the things that's cool about these modifiers, is if I take like something like a triangulate, or even, let's try turning that off for now. Let's throw a second decimate on here. And if I put a second decimate in there, and this one's set to collapse, well, now this will turn that into flatter planes for me. Oh, way overboard. And I can even, let's go ahead and I'm going to put that triangulate back in there. But if I put it in between the two, it's going to give me a different result. And so I can see, turning this off, now I have the whole effect that's being generated from two modifiers stacked on top of each other. So depending on how this one goes, I'm going to get different shapes and a different level of faceting to it. And then this one, I can decide how like carved or angular I want the surface to be. So by stacking these together, I get a different effect, and I can kind of keep some of those carvings that I have into the corners and the seams. And in fact, since this is all built on top of like dynamic stuff, I can come back in here with a tool, like back into sculpt mode with everything still on. And I can actually carve stuff and see real time. It's a little slow this way, but if you really want to like work with it and see especially things like the move tool with grab and see like how those affect it, you can push and pull things depending on how strong your computer is. and actually see all of those processes happen and compute in real time. And so it's a cool kind of active way of creating something that when you put it in your scene can become an interesting focal point for what you're doing. So I'd say take some of these tools, maybe look at some interesting rock formations, or build something that maybe is going to draw from our final beauty shot our eye into a single location. If you're doing a desert, maybe like a chimney rock or some pictured rock kind of thing, maybe a big plateau. If you're doing like something more on the ocean, think about like a cove, like those caves that get carved out by the ocean. If you're doing something in a forest, like a big bluff or a large cliff that sort of rises out from some trees would be really cool. So just think about some key features and some interesting things you could do. And I'll see you in the next one.